one topic I want you to be ready with is a topic on desertification. What is desertification? Why do we have desertification? What are the areas of desertification and what are the solutions? Because desertification का convention last year India में हुआ है. So I think desertification as a question will be important in soil management. Now, what I want you to know is, what is desertification? Desertification के बहुत सारे definitions हैं. The most acceptable one is expansion of deserts along the margins. ये एक definition है. It's also a form of extreme land degradation. We're talking about problems related to extreme erosion. We're talking about the gully erosion, ravine formations. We're talking about erosion where the topsoil is entirely lost. And these type of problems, expansion of deserts and extreme land degradation, this happens generally because of dry conditions. It happens because of exploitation of the soil, intensive cultivation of marginal lands. It also happen because of fallowing of the marginal lands and also because of overgrazing. I'm quickly jotting down the points. Again, मैं ऐसे अलग से पढ़ा नहीं रहा हूँ. I believe all of you should have studied this. All of you should know this. But quickly I'm explaining the concepts. Desertification पे ना एक answer possible है. Either in GS also in geography option दोनों में possible है. So extreme form of problem, expansion of deserts along the margins. It happens because of dry conditions, exploitation of soils, because of fallowing of the land in the marginal areas. The soil is not very productive, the soil not very fertile, and if you fallow the land, you tend to lose in the dry conditions. Intensive cultivation कर दिया, ज़्यादा cultivation कर दिया, the land starts losing fertility. Overgrazing is a very important reason. Apart from this, most of these are related to agriculture issues. Apart from this, we can also have desertification because of deforestation. We can also have desertification because of improper land management, such as over application of fertilizers and the problem of salinization. These are directly related to crops. What type of crops are you growing? What type of land density you have, fallowing, grazing? Yeah, agriculture se related hai. But this is a bit different. Agriculture se hai, but not directly about crops itself. So if you overuse the fertilizers, you have got salinization problems. If you are having deforestation, you are losing the slope stability and the soils can be lost dramatically. So have something about this and the primary concerns area. ये तो what is the problem? Now the concerns area, मैंने कहा कि dry regions and drought regions. So dry regions, it happens in desert margins and Africa में sub-Saharan Africa है and India में all the dry areas of India. Ladakh, talking about all the areas which have rainfall less than 50 centimeters, rainfall less than 6 centimeters. So all the concerned areas, ये सारा ना आप map बना के दिखाना. What is desertification? What are the areas impacted by desertification? And if you can mention some data from IPCC report, desertification areas have increased by more than 20% and approximately more than 50% of the agricultural land is now vulnerable to desertification. And more than 50% of agricultural land is vulnerable to desertification. ये global data हो गया. India का data मेरे पास में नहीं है, but yes, we do have an atlas, desertification atlas है, land degradation atlas है, remote sensing, National Remote Sensing Agency publishes this. Okay, so just mention that the areas are increasing in desertification. So what is desertification? Use a map. What are the areas of desertification and why we have desertification? Now, the more important part I would add to your answer is the solutions part. The solution primarily is about proper land management in conjunction with agriculture and water management. one of the best solutions is National Watershed Development Program. So desertification is a component of drought-prone area development program, is a component of desert development program, is also a component of National Wasteland Development Program. National Watershed Development Program में desertification is important component. इसके अलावा last 2018 and 2019 में नीति आयोग has stressed on spring shed based land management. In fact, नीति आयोग का जो development document है, it is mentioned in that spring shed based management. So spring shed is a bit different from watershed. Watershed, I hope you remember, it is an elevation with a crest area. It includes catchment, the slopes, the river. ये सारा आपका watershed हो गया. Watershed is essentially that geohydrological basin, starting from the crest of the mountain, including the slopes, the basin, the river, and all the activities inside that. Spring shed is a bit different. Spring shed includes watershed plus the natural aquifers and groundwater system based management. What is a spring shed based management? It is a watershed management along with integration of natural aquifers, integration of groundwater systems for managing and use of the water resources. So spring shed जो है, नीति आयोग कह रहा है कि India has approximately 5 million springs and they contribute a fair amount of water security for the hills. And the spring sheds or springs have also been important traditionally. Traditional water resources हैं, spring shed. So we want to integrate spring shed based development into the watershed program. We have this national program called as Jal Shakti Abhiyan. This is about encouraging the development of groundwater and even encouraging the participation of the private sector. So इसमें क्या है? Aquifer mapping है. In this, they are looking at reviving natural aquifers. It's also about increasing private participation. So yes, Atal Bhujal Yojana, but Atal Bhujal Yojana is not a part of your spring shed management. Jal Shakti Abhiyan is part of your spring shed management. But Atal Bhujal Yojana definitely is about groundwater. ठीक है, so ये 2-3 points आप add कर लेना. So be alert on a question on desertification. उसके बाद you can go on thereafter. So what are the problems? Why do we have it? What are the areas of desertification and solution को watershed management? उसके बाद of course afforestation programs to talk about the climate change issues. So I hope this is taken care of. Okay, soil and water. 5 million number of springs. The number of springs that we have, and most of them are in the areas of the hills. We have more than 5 million springs. So that's about this. Let's move on. Now, we were discussing distribution of plants and animals. This has been an important question almost every year for the last 4 or 5 years. They keep asking some scheme or the other. Now, in distribution of plants and animals, you need to know, number one, what are the factors that affect. Number two, what is the pattern? We can discuss the regions, and you should be able to detail each region. Pura pattern or the regionalization you need. So, यहाँ पर there are many schemes. And finally, you need to know enough to write about each of the regions. So, ये जो factors हैं, so under distribution of plants and animals, these are the 3 themes you'll have to study. Now, let me give you a kind of a chart. Now, what are the factors? If I list down the factors, एक है आपका environmental or the natural factors. Then we are talking under this, you talk about the role of sunlight, the role of temperature, the role of topography, the role of soil, the role of winds. Soil factors are also called as edaphic factors. Topography and altitude, temperature, sunlight. And you must relate these factors with the concept of tolerance and relate this with the concept of adaptations. Each of these topics में कुछ ना कुछ there are technical words and terms. Made simple textbook में है. I'll tell you what you can. And also talk about the role of barriers. So if a life form has been exposed to conditions which are beyond their tolerance, we call those as barriers. What are the role of barriers? What are barriers? Barriers are natural conditions beyond the tolerance range of a life form, and they act as in the spread of the life form. ये एक component of discussion है. The environmental factors, okay, which includes sunlight, which includes temperature, altitude, topography, soil factors, and wind factors. I forgot moisture and water. I need to add that water availability. Okay, so इसमें discussion ज़्यादा आप temperature पे कर सकते हो. Life forms which are adapted to a very broad range of temperature, they are called as URI type. Life forms which are adapted to short range of temperature, they are called as stenotypes. Life forms adapted to water. We have got life forms like hygrophytes. We have got mesophytes. We have got halophytes, hygrophytes, mesophytes. Phenotype, they are capable of surviving in very narrow range. Water पे ही xerophytes. आप लोग please अपना notes देखना, and if you want some bit of extra information, this is a chapter. I will help you with this chapter, of course. Chapter in your Made Simple Part 1, chapter number 20, page number 236 onwards. We have got hydrophytes, we have got mesophytes, halophytes, xerophytes. Page 243 Made Simple Part 1 में है ये. Made Simple Part 1 में है. Okay. Then we also have life forms adapted to different soil conditions. Soil-specific adaptations, which are part of the microorganisms and how they survive. Soil as a biogeographic importance. So we have oxalophytes, halophytes, samophytes. Soil pe we have oxalophytes, exhalophytes, which are capable of growing in acidic soils. We have halophytes. Halophytes water wala bhi hai और soil वाले भी हैं, survive in salt conditions. We have got samophytes, SAMMO. Samophytes, we can survive on sand dunes, and we have CHASM, chasmophytes. They are capable of surviving in gaps and crevices, CHAMOPHYTES. They can survive in the gaps of the rocks. They can survive in the crevices of the rocks. Chasm का मतलब होता है cracks, some gap there. इसके अलावा Made Simple also talks about life forms which are adapted to different type of calcium content. Calcifuge, and we have calcicoles. Samocytes are those which survive on desert sand dunes. So have an idea about these terms. I cannot teach all of this in detail in this class, but आपको बता दिया एक set of environmental conditions हैं that decide how life forms survive. Sunlight as a factor. We have got phototropism. We have got those chlorophyll, something called as phototropism. What are the natural environmental factors? Barriers का role बहुत important है. Barriers they act as a kind of hindrance for the life forms to spread. They are beyond the tolerance, and barriers do one more thing. Barriers, खासकर topographical barriers, are also responsible for development of new species. A process is called as speciation. This means the development and formation of species. और speciation का एक important basis है what is called as when a habitat is fragmented or is separated by barriers. New species can develop. So this is a large habitat and some barrier develops, maybe a mountain, a river, it develops, and the life forms on this side no longer can come to interact with life forms on this side. So this becomes a separate species, and this also becomes a separate species. This type of speciation is referred to as allopatric speciation. The role of barriers in allopatric speciation, and when this happens at very small scales, it's called as peripatric speciation. So they will not ask you what is allopatric speciation. Allopatric is this one. It's a large habitat. It has now been divided by some barrier, and the species get separated. The species can no longer interact with one another. So the life forms on one side become different from the life forms on the other side. This is referred to as allotropic speciation. Basically, I am talking about what is the role of barriers. What is the role of barriers? So barrier ka role number one is it does not allow for the life forms to spread. And second role of barriers is the barriers can also result in formation of new species called as allopatric speciation process. और यही allopatric speciation, when it happens on a smaller scale, it's also called as peripatric speciation. अगर आप ये सारा combine कर देते हो ना, you have got a pretty nice discussion on what are the environmental factors that impact the distribution of plants and animals. So you can be ready for a short note on this. The role of environmental factors in the distribution of plants and animals. Now, linked to this, the role of biological factors. One is the role of adaptation. Adaptation, okay, with respect to the environmental conditions. That's an important biological factor. एक और biological factor है the dispersion and the germination according to the natural conditions. Biological factor also includes interspecies interactions and relations. Dispersion, germination, इसी में आप add कर सकते हो migrations. So these three are important part of biological factor. But it is याद रहे that they're all related to the environmental factors. How they adapt, the dispersion, the migration, and the interspecies relation. The interspecies relation probably will have relatively less link with the environmental factors, but dispersion adaptations may the relationship is strong. Now, talking about the interspecies, it's about how the life forms relate to one another. I will suggest a diagram called as a double Z diagram. आप इसको याद रखो. This will take care. Okay, this is Z and this is double Z. So एक ये वाला है. This is one Z and this is the second Z. If there are two life forms, how are they related? Say a life form A and a life form B. If the relationship helps both, if the relationship is neutral for both, if the relationship is negative for both, or relationship is neutral for one and helpful for other. Relationship is negative for one, neutral for other. So this is the double Z diagram. इसके नाम है. This is called as mutualism. This relationship is called as commensalism. This is called as parasitism, also referred to as predation. This is called as neutralism. This is called as amensalism. And this is competition. So if it is positive for both, it's called as mutualism. If it is good for one, neutral for another one, this is called as commensalism. If it is good for one, negative for another, this is called as parasitism. Also, एक form है predation. If it is neutral for both, neutralism. If it is negative for one, for others neutral, it's called as amensalism. And if it is minus for both, it's called as competition. Mutualism is also sometimes referred to as symbiosis. But otherwise, the word symbiosis is more of a generic word. Like think of corals. Think of corals and lichens. Commensalism, the example hai remora fish and sharks. So they move around sharks and they feed off whatever remains the shark feeds on. The shark feeds, and whatever remains of the feed, the remora fish, R-E-M-O-R-A, feeds on that. Predation, these are ticks, parasites hote hain. Neutralism, now this is actually a hypothetical concept. If it is this one, then generally we do not have relationships here. This is considered to be hypothetical. Amensalism, example is pine trees and grass. Pine tree does not have any benefit, but the grass can get killed. Those chemicals secreted by the pine trees, they can end up killing the grass underneath. That's why jahan par pine trees hote hain, those areas will not have grasses, very, very less undergrowth. And competition, you know, you got two animals fighting for the same. Competition can be interspecies competition. It can also be intraspecies. The same life form, intraspecies competition. Last time आपका amensalism पे पूछा हुआ question था. And just for clarification, amensalism is used in many sense. So amensalism, technically speaking, is minus negative, but amensalism is sometimes also considered to include parasitism and also competition. All of this sometimes may be referred to as amensalism also. Okay, so this was asked last time, may not be asked again, but please do know what is adaptation, what is dispersion and migration, what are the interspecies relationship, and remember this double Z diagram. Okay, so these two columns आपको भरना होगा. Factors में the role of the natural factors, which are the natural physical factors, sunlight, temperature, and the rest, and the role of the biotic factors. Now, there is a third set of factor, and this is probably more of geography here, the role of past geological processes, which includes the role of tectonics processes, the past processes and geological tectonic mein hoga, and the role of climate change. Lot of climate change is related to tectonics also. In an answer, we would like this also, अगर आपको words permit कर रहा है, or this can be a separate question itself. The role of geological processes, tectonic processes, and the related climate change in the distribution of plants and animals.